Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Steve Sebedowski, and as promised, we're doing a Facebook Live with Colonel Rob Maness, and really glad to be able to talk to the Colonel once again. Last time we had a chat, it wasn't via Facebook Live. So good afternoon, Colonel Maness. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me back.
Listen, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know that it's been very busy. I know that you've been very busy, and so what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to ask you a question just for starts, and then I'm going to send this thing over to you in terms of your Facebook. So tell us, what is going on now that the election is over and we have an election coming up? What's going on with you?
Well, we've been spending a lot of time with family. We had a great Thanksgiving holiday. Two of my sons that are in the military, one from England actually, were able to make it home. So we've been doing that and getting ready for Christmas now. My boss, Candy, is very, very efficient when it comes to Christmas decorations and things like that. So we've been working real hard the last few days to get the house ready for Christmas, and we're looking forward to that. I've been, watching the Trump administration names come through the cycle, I guess, along with everybody else, and comment on them every once in a while. And we've been doing different radio interviews when folks want to talk about the nominees and those kinds of things. And my grassroots team has been helping the GOP in the state. We got called right away. So we've got folks that are working on the grassroots effort to get out the vote on December 10th for the runoff election for the U.S. Senate.
So right now, obviously, you're looking at what's going on nationally, and your views at this point in time. I know it's still very early, and I know everybody is, whether you're on the winning side or losing side, you're relieved. So from your standpoint.
Yeah, I think most people that I talk to are just glad the election's over. I think Mr. Trump, the president-elect, is doing what I expected him to do as somebody that's primarily experienced as a successful businessman and operating multi-billion-dollar companies. And he is going through his process that he has to select and interview folks for the various cabinet positions, and he is really not let me down as far as my expectations goes. He appears to be picking a mix of folks that are aligned with different factions in the Republican Party in some cases, but also picking some folks that are new from outside government and other agencies, and that's what I would expect a businessman to do. And I think he is quite appropriately being very transparent about the process. I mean, the media is even right there camped out in Trump Tower, and they're trying to interview everybody that walks through. And I've been up there once. That's a really big double-sided entrance to the main plaza there on the ground floor, and there are a lot of people coming through. So the media has got a big job on their hands trying to catch everybody when they get on the elevators and things.
So transparent. Explain why and how do you feel like he's being, or his campaign, or now transition is being transparent?
Yeah. Well, I think we haven't seen this in in several different presidential administrations where people are actually being seen going to meet with the president-elect, and he is highlighting it. He's actually giving feedback direct to the public when he leaves a meeting as to what he thinks about it, and what he thinks of the feedback on the person themselves in a limited way. But I mean that's pretty transparent, and I think he realizes, and his team recognizes, that he's got a certain base at the grassroots level that really supported him, and he thinks, I believe, that they deserve to have at least that level of knowledge as to what's going on. Now, they're not going to agree with all of the picks, I don't believe. I think that you've seen a big dust-up over the Mitt Romney discussion and the interviews with him, even coming out from his campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway. So people aren't always going to agree. But I think Trump's a businessman, and he's doing what a businessman would do. He's trying to find folks that have the right skill sets that he's looking for, regardless of what faction or what they did during the campaign. And I think that's a good thing.
Great, great. Now, I did share it with you. You can check your message on Facebook and go ahead and share if you like. In addition to that, if anybody has a question that they want to ask, I'll be looking at my little globe here, and I'll be able to check your question, any comment also, and be glad to go ahead and mention you, etc. Those people who are commenting. And lastly, share the video with others. I'm really pleased that Colonel Maness is with us today and be able to answer your questions and my questions. So, yeah, big news in terms of carrier.
Yeah, that's great. That's great news. Some people are giving the president-elect and vice president-elect credit, which is, I think it's due that they're already working for the working people of America by getting Carrier to agree to keep those 1,000 jobs here in the United States. And that's why I think there was a lot of crossover voting to Mr. Trump from the blue-collar side on the Democratic Party. I think he got a lot of crossover, at least anecdotally, from what I saw out and about the country and in the state.
It just so happened it was in Indiana. Of course, that's where the vice president. So I'm just, I guess you could argue that, hey, why didn't this happen before? But it is happening. I understand there was some sweeteners. Any idea in terms of what actually happened, what transpired?
I've heard the same things that you have, probably, as far as maybe some tax breaks may be involved, but I haven't seen any real details yet. So, why didn't it happen before? I'm not sure. They've got a lot on their plate. At one point the media was all over the Trump administration, who's not even in office yet, about their terrible transition. I think it's gone very, very well and is moving very quickly through the process. But it is what it is, and the outcome is great to have. They probably had a little bit of inside information, since Governor Pence is the governor of Indiana, that they used to leverage. And I would assume that as a businessman, Trump's going to leverage all the information that he can if it's going to be on behalf and in support of the American people. That's what he promised to do. And so far, it appears that he's trying to at least keep that promise.
Now, in terms of draining the swamp, do you feel like he's really out there? He is draining. I mean, obviously, the two projected picks in terms of commerce and treasury seem to be a little bit inconsistent with the draining.
It depends on what he meant by that. When I said drain the swamp, when I developed that hashtag in 2014 and 2015 with GatorPack, we were talking about draining the swamp inside of D.C. and getting the career politicians and the lobbyists out of the group. I think to a degree, when he fired Chris Christie as the transition manager and fired all the lobbyists that were being brought in by Mr. Christie to do that, that's what his intent is. Now, as far as the nominations, it's debatable whether those are the nominations that are going to drain the swamp or whether they're just continuing to build on the same old bureaucracy. The one thing you can say about Treasury and Commerce is they are outsiders from a government perspective. They're not part of the current political establishment inside D.C., and they haven't been in politics before. Now, having said that, one guy is a Goldman Sachs guy, and just like Tim Geithner was from Wall Street under President Obama, there's some things about that I have some concerns with, and I think the grassroots folks do too, that believe in the Drain the Swamp hashtag, because what we're looking for is a complete clean slate as much as possible to get at those bureaucracies and get them under control for the American people. I think that's what people see out here, is that a lot of them believe the bureaucracies have grown so large and they're unelected folks, and with the tendency to overregulate that's been going on the last few years, especially, folks are very concerned in what they see happening in their lives.
I'm just kind of curious. You just ran a race for U.S. Senate, and it coincided, obviously, same time as the national election. And did you see anything inconsistent between what happened here in Louisiana and what happened nationwide in terms of
Uh,
just the feeling, the emotions, etc.?
well, I'll tell you what, we haven't done the critical analysis of the race yet. It's not complete yet, so I really can't comment on any specific quantitative data or anything yet, but I can.
What was the difference that you see and that you saw in terms of what happened here during the election and nationally? Go ahead, please.
Well, I think nationally, folks were going for Mr. Trump as the outsider, somebody that had not been part of the political establishment, not from inside the Washington, D.C. Beltway, and that's what folks want because they see a need to really to get step back a little bit from this entrenched bureaucracy and these career politicians and put somebody new in there. But I didn't see that in the down ballot effects from what we saw and have seen around the country. Now, our race here at the Senate level is not finished yet, but the two nominees have been in politics for many, many, many years and would be considered career politicians. So the down ballot effect of going for the outsider that had not been part of the political establishment really didn't have that much of an effect from what we could tell.
Okay. Now, how was your election different this time from 2 years ago?
Well, there were 24 candidates in the race.
Mm-hmm.
David Duke was in the race. And there were a lot of folks that did not have statewide name recognition in the race. So a lot of different variables. It was a shorter campaign for us. We raised less money, but we were able to put together enough support to be able to compete. And we had some things beyond our control. Hurt us not being in the two televised debates, we think had a dramatic impact because we almost had a media blackout on our campaign for the last 2 or 3 weeks of the campaign, and that makes a big difference when folks are just starting to pay attention at that time.
Sure. I mean, that really was strange. Any facts about that you'd like to share with us? I mean, 5%. I mean, the first debate was 5%. Am I correct? And you had to have $1 million raised.
Mm-hmm.
The second was 5%, and there wasn't any number in terms of dollars raised.
Yeah, I think the facts are out there on those things. I really don't have anything to add to that. I would just say that it did have a negative impact on our ability to get beyond 5% in the real poll on election day is what we got. But I think that says something after about a month of media blackout that we were still able to get 5%. Tells you how strong we were before the debate started in that month prior, and that we had a good opportunity to get there. We just couldn't overcome that. And it is what it is. God has a hand in everything, and it just wasn't meant to be. So we are moving on, and we'll continue to stay active in our government and in politics and do what we think is right for the country and the state.
Right. So getting back to the elections just for a second, when David Duke first declared, I mean, you pretty much got into a skirmish with him. I know that you were being slammed left and right by who I call the Dukies. And I'm just wondering, did they ever stop?
They never stopped. They attacked me. They attacked pictures of my youngest son with me. They attacked my family. Most of it was on Twitter. That feed is still up there unless they've gone in and deleted the tweets. That's where that was, and I welcome that fight because white supremacy and the KKK and all of those things are things that I stand against, and I stand for liberty and freedom, and every person being equal and is born that way and has that right to be equal and have the equality of opportunity that America gives to all of us. As our birthright and our right from God. So I stand against that, and I took that fight on willingly and aggressively and felt like really as somebody that had been selected to be a commander in the United States Armed Forces 3 times, where you are documented and you have documented policies of non-discrimination and you have to lead that way, or there's no way you could be successful in the U.S. military and be a racist. I felt like that was my role. One of my roles was to take that on and lead that fight, because it just would be a disservice to the American people and people of Louisiana to not have somebody take them on aggressively. So we did.
You know, in the last poll that was public, basically, in order to be in the debate, he got 5%. You were at roughly 3%. But the election turned that around. He dropped below 3%. Yeah. You were at 5%.
Yeah.
Any idea why there was that flip-flop?
Political polling is not an exact science. I will just tell you that pollsters are able to pick the data universe based on their projections of things like voter turnout, demographic turnout, likelihood of voters, the geographic area, and those things. So it's fairly easy to manipulate that, and we think that poll was manipulated. A lot of other folks do too. It's unfortunate. I think it did a disservice to Louisiana, because Louisianans missed an opportunity to see a combat veteran, a leader, somebody that has not been in politics but has the state's interests at heart first and the country's interests at heart first on that national stage, and it was a national stage. So it's very unfortunate, but it is what it is, and we just have moved on now, and we'll continue that fight.
Okay, before we get to the future, just a little bit more about the past. And there was that article about your being at a meeting with, I believe, somebody who was running the Super PAC for John Fleming. And could you tell us about that?
Well, it's documented again in the press, and the facts are what they are, but basically it's against the state law for any candidate to be threatened or attempted to be bribed with anything of value in any election, even a federal election. And the incident that you're referring to was a major donor from Mr. Fleming's campaign and the super PAC that was supporting him, telling me that I had to get out of the race, and he called me and met with me face-to-face, was all the way down here from Shreveport, and told me I needed to get out of the race that day. The first TV debate was the next day, or I'd be politically done for the rest of my life, and offered to get me an opportunity in another venue, and explained to me how he could do that. And I said no, obviously, and stayed in the race because we thought we had a good chance, and we still had a viable pathway to victory at that time, and eventually filed a criminal complaint because it is against state law. When we took it to our attorneys, they assessed the situation and said, yes, there's probable cause here, so we should file a criminal complaint. And that's not only my duty, but my right to do that when I think a crime's been committed. And I believe that it's the investigation is still open at this time, and facts continue to be gathered on that.
Wow, wow. So in terms of the future, in your personal future, I know there probably will be a seat that's available, the Treasury seat. Mm-hmm. I heard or saw on Facebook that you're looking at it.
Well, I've heard that some of my grassroots supporters are trying to draft me to look at that. Of course, you know.
That's very loyal supporters, I can tell you that. I mean,
yes,
really.
That's some great supporters. I mean, you don't get 100,000 votes after the things that happened in our campaign without really good supporters, and we're very grateful to them for their continued support. You know, and they want to see the best for their state, and they think that I'm a really good candidate, and I believe I have some great qualifications. I even have qualifications for state treasurer if we decided to do that, but we haven't made any decisions on what to do. Obviously, I would have statewide name recognition, and I don't know what other candidates might be in that race, but it's very difficult to have statewide name recognition in this state, as you are aware, and as all these candidates that just lost in the Senate primary are aware. Even with millions of dollars, you don't do very well if you don't have statewide name recognition from the outset. So we will take a look at every opportunity as it presents itself, and then go from there.
So, I mean, after serving in the Air Force and becoming colonel, I mean, you have a record of service, no doubt
Mhm.
about that. I mean, a major record of service. So, why do you feel like you need to continue that service at this point in time in terms of politics? Was there something that yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm opposed to career politicians. I want to see things like term limits put in place at the national level, in the legislature especially. I'm glad that I live in a state that has term limits. I think they could be better because it still allows for career politicians to go from legislative house from one to the other and stay too long. I think our system was really designed for citizens that have different backgrounds and different capabilities and different levels of experience to go into government for short periods of time and then return to society. And that's not what's been happening. So I'm absolutely opposed to that. I believe that that's the greatest danger to my grandchildren's future in a United States of America, in a state of Louisiana. And I want them to have a USA and a state of Louisiana that's free and prosperous and treats everybody equally, and folks can rely on it to provide them the equality of opportunity that I was provided. So that's what I'm about. Don't necessarily have to be in elected office. It's just that I saw that this career politician phenomena has occurred over the last 100 or so years, maybe even more before that. And I believe that our system wasn't designed for that. And I believe it hurts us as a society to continue this, and we need to break it up.
Now, obviously, Donald Trump was not a career politician, and he
No,
beat out what 17 candidates, and of course, a heavily funded Democrat. Do you
absolutely.
think that, yeah, I mean, do you think that although he had billions of dollars and he was using that as his as part of his strength, so do you think he's opened doors for those people who say like yourself, but who don't have billions of dollars? But somebody
Well,
who has a new voice, somebody who can bring something new to the
mhm.
table.
As I mentioned before, the down ballot effect wasn't that great in the primary here and in the different races around the states. Really, the career politicians and the establishment types have won at the down ballot level so far. So I can't say for sure what the effect is. I'm sure there'll be some effect, but Mr. Trump had over $2 billion of earned media, and that's very difficult to get. The state of Louisiana is a very difficult place to earn media beyond just polling and money raised, and have a conversation and a real debate about policies and where we are and what's right for the state and what's right for the country. If you go back and look at the media, primarily the media coverage in this state is about those things, polling and money raised and who's supporting who and those kind of things, and not what the various candidates believe in, what their experience levels are outside of politics and outside of government, and what they intend to do for the state and for the country. And I'm not so sure that Mr. Trump has had that level of an effect at the down ballot, based on what we've seen with the facts.
You raise a really good point about that people, including myself, when we write a report, I mean, it seems to me that people are, at least in terms of elections, they're interested in the horse race more than what the horses are saying.
Oh,
And
exactly right.
however, at the same time, I mean, you have to. I'm sure you have to agree with me. Hopefully, you agree with me on this. That one thing we found out about Donald Trump is that, and as you know, I'm not a Trump fan. But the one thing that we found out about Donald Trump is that we don't know what his policies are, and his policies changed a lot. So how
Hmm.
important are policies in the long run if you got somebody who's now president-elect who didn't have a policy, but he's president-elect just by the fact that he got $2 billion and he has a personality and he's bigger than life.
Well, I think you highlight a different issue though, and that is, does it really matter what people say in campaigns when it's put up against what they actually do when they win? and get in office. You know, we have an approach in this country that I've learned since I've participated in these two federal level campaigns and statewide campaigns now, that you know, a lot of folks they will say anything to get elected, and then they go and they try to implement their policies that they believe in when they get there. And that's what gets folks in trouble with their constituents quite often, is that they've said one thing on the campaign trail and done the opposite in many cases when they get into office. And I think we do need to have a state and national conversation, and the media should be part of that conversation about that approach. And why do we think it's okay to do that? Because I don't think it's okay. I mean, I even did you know, Mr. Trump has adopted some of my things. We talked about the drain the swamp hashtag. He adopted the contract approach that we adopted from Gingrich in the contract with America. And one of my contract statements was that if I tell you that I'll do something on the campaign trail, when I get to Washington, I'll do it regardless of the personal or professional costs to me personally. And that's the type of you know, leader servants that we need in office, and that's very concerning to me. Now, what Mr. Trump is doing what every other politician has been doing, and I think he's played the game and played the system right up to the point where he won, and he beat 16 professional politicians, well, most of them were anyway, that were well funded and very well qualified and could present their ideas very well. But Mr. Trump was able to put his ideas that he talked about during the campaign into in a way that the people could understand them, and really captured their imagination. Just his simple slogan of making America great again, it captures the imagination of a people, a whole people, not just one political party, but a whole people, really, that even those that oppose him, they can see in their imagination that we want a better country where everybody has equality of opportunity and everybody's treated equally and everybody is a good neighbor, and there's low crime rates and low incarceration rates. Those are all things that people can agree on, and I think Mr. Trump was able to successfully do that. Now, he's already backed off of some of those campaign promises, as we've seen from what I've heard, and I've heard some voices concerned about that, but you know, he hasn't been inaugurated yet. Let's see what his picks do. Let's see what he does when he gets in office, and see how he handles that. It's my hope that he'll be different than a career politician, but you never know until they actually get into the arena and they take that oath of office exactly how it's going to work.
I would argue and have argued that he changed his positions during the campaign, not just in terms of, I mean, and quite often, I mean, just in terms I'm not here to, I mean, I can go and bash Trump on other issues. That's not what this is about. But, you know, because you're talking about the question of a candidate who speaks his mind, who is sincere, as I believe as I know that you are, and who, you know, you can rely upon what that person says. He's proving just the opposite, and not just in terms of campaign and election, but within the campaign itself. So, I mean, doesn't it send a message, you know, to you, you know, next time you run, or should you run, or to others, that hey, you know, you don't have to be consistent with the campaign. People aren't going to care.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in our system, you even see it once the primary is over and you go into the runoff. You see a completely different person as the candidate. Sometimes I've even seen that happen. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we should move away from that and have a national conversation on how to move away from that, so that we're really, you know, required to present what we think and what policies we're going to fight for. Yeah, you know, it's not to say you can't change your mind. I mean, Mr. Trump was in a 19-month campaign or something like that. I've been in an 18-month campaign. Sometimes you do change your mind because you run into the right person and you have a cogent conversation with them and they convince you that your position was wrong. I've done that myself. But I do think we need to have that national conversation, because it seems too easy. People accept it too easily, that it's okay to say one thing on the campaign trail and then do the opposite when you get into office in this country. We shouldn't be. That shouldn't be the standard. That should be the exception to the rule, not the rule.
Yeah, which actually presents an interesting dilemma. I mean, the thing is that politicians, as we all know, have the advantage. Their, say, elected officials have an advantage of being an incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
But it also means they have a record. Whereas you have non-politicians, such as Trump and others who don't have a record. And they can come in there with a clean slate. And they can say, well, my record has evolved. My opinion has evolved because pretty much like you said, I talked to somebody and they convinced me otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because you can't be the expert on every subject, and I think we all have to be flexible enough to do that. But it's also obvious sometimes when you have a candidate that presents themselves as a whole in one perspective and then completely changes when they either get to the next phase of the campaign or when they win the office and start governing. And that has an effect on us too. At some point you have to govern, and governing is much different than campaigning. I think Mr. Obama has learned that from my perspective. I believe he campaigned while he ran his governance more like he was campaigning every day, and I think that probably hurt him in the way folks accepted his policies and the debate or lack of debate from some folks' perspective like me that should have occurred on some of these major policies that were implemented.
Before I share my screen and go to Twitter and have you comment about some of the things that I just saw, from a military standpoint, what do you think that this country needs to do to, I guess, return to our glory, at the same time, not be viewed as we have been viewed in the past, which is, say, I guess third world has considered us, to be expansionists. And yet we have situations where you can't say certain things because you run the risk of something happening in the country like terror. So overall, I mean, that's a dilemma I see. You don't want to be the bad guy that the United States was considered in the past. I mean, you don't want that. At the same time, you've got to be firm. Same time, you cannot, they got some pretty nasty people out there who will, you don't need a country fighting another country. You can do it by having terrorists, taking self-help. So given that background, how do you deal with this from a military standpoint?
Well, the first thing we need to take a look at is these interventionist policies. I disagree with I don't think people see us as expansionists as much as they see us intervening when we shouldn't be, is my opinion. And I'm opposed to interventionist policies. I'm not opposed to using military force at all. As a matter of fact, I've participated in those things many, many times in my life, and military force has a place in our world because our world has bad guys in it. And many of those bad guys hate us for our prosperity, our freedom, and our success, and those kind of things. So they want to do things to hurt the American people and our allies. So we've got to not intervene when we shouldn't. Libya is a case that between the Democrat and Republican Party folks that believe in intervening like that, they were able to come together and get approval to do that. And we went in there unnecessarily. While you may not like Muammar Gaddafi, I didn't like him at all. Matter of fact, I've been a target of some of his terrorism before. He at that point, when this intervening was occurring, was actually an ally of the West and the United States and was helping us in counterterrorism operations, and we destroyed that unnecessarily. And we destroyed that country, not just us, the United States, but NATO, the NATO allies, and we're seen as going in there and doing that unnecessarily. And now that's created a power vacuum that the Islamic State has grown into. And from a strategic perspective, if we continue to do those kinds of things over and over again, I think we did the same thing in Iraq, looking back on it. which is much easier to do than beforehand. Believe me, I was in the Pentagon when the planning was occurring for Iraq, and it's very difficult to judge whether we were right or wrong from that position. But looking back on it, it obviously was an unnecessary intervention that destabilized the entire Middle East. So we need to get out of this mode of intervening unnecessarily and take much greater care when we use American military force or get our allies together to do that. Now, having said that, we also have another major challenge, and that is, and you mentioned it, terrorism. Well, it's a matter of perspective, Steve. If we continue to look at these acts like what just happened at Ohio University as crimes and as just terrorism instead of what it really is, which is a war that's been declared on the West and the United States in particular by Islamic jihadists. They're represented now primarily by the Islamic State, which is an actual state on the ground that has territory, has cities, raises revenue, does trade, has military forces, not just in northeastern Syria, but across the Middle East, across northern Africa, and the central part of Africa, and on the Arabian Peninsula, and in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. This force now is becoming much more widespread, and it is an actual state, whether it's recognized by the United Nations or the international community or not, and we need to treat it like such. And in my opinion, what needs to occur is the Congress needs to get its courage, retake its power under the Constitution, and debate whether this nation should be at war against the Islamic State or not, because we either need to be at war with them or not. And right now we're in what I see as a limbo area, and we don't have all the resources we need focused on that enemy like we need to, like we did in World War II, in order to eliminate it. Because you can't just eliminate an ideology. You have to attack this thing from multiple perspectives, diplomatically, financially, from an information perspective, and military force too. And all of those resources are not adequately focused on this war that we're in because we are not recognizing it as a war. And as long as a nation does that, no matter how powerful they are, eventually that enemy that does recognize it as a war will continue to grow and grow and grow. And just like Nazi Germany did, that ultimately became the Axis powers with Japan and Italy, that enemy continued to grow because it wasn't recognized. And I'm not saying these things are exactly like each other. Obviously they're not, but it's a similar situation as far as how we're approaching it and what we're acknowledging or not. And really, it's a resource focus and a priorities focus situation. And as long as we're not focused with our priorities and our resources on eliminating this enemy in all of its forms, then we will continue to face this. And I believe that we shouldn't be treating it as criminal terrorism. We should be treating it as military action when these things happen. And this young man that was killed at Ohio State University, or Ohio University, I'm sorry, he was a soldier of the Islamic State. They've claimed him, whether he was in civilian clothes or not, or was an American citizen or not, he's an enemy combatant. But as long as we're in this limbo status, he's not really an enemy combatant. That's what's generated all the debate about Guantanamo Bay and the status of the individuals there and those kind of things, is the United States' lack of political will and courage in our Congress to step up to the plate and do what's right. And that's what's right. And I hate to say it because I hate war. It's the most despicable thing that human beings can do to each other. I've had to participate in it. And believe me, if I'm asked to participate in it again for my country, I would do it in a heartbeat. I wouldn't change a thing, and I will do it much more aggressively than any of our enemies could. That's why America is still what it is. But it's one of those things where I looking at the situation, we continue to have these attacks, and they're getting worse and more random, and it's because we're not dealing with the situation of what it really is, and it really is a war, and we need to treat it like it is.
Let me throw some out to you. I mean, one of the major issues I have in terms of this issue, and I really would like to get your perspective, and that is, there are, obviously a few million Muslims in this country. The gentleman who was killed at Ohio State, a refugee.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're in a damn if we do, damn if we don't type situation, because if the more that we approach this in terms of, calling, like I believe the gentleman that Donald Trump has just chosen, to be national security, he said that um, Islam was, what did he say? Was a, it wasn't, I don't remember exact words, but you probably recall it, but
General Flynn,
it wasn't, I'm sorry?
General Flynn,
Yeah,
the National Security Advisor appointee.
yeah. But the comment that he made was that it was I want to say ugly religion, or it wasn't a religion at all, I think is really
I
what
think
he
he
said.
called. I think he called it a cancer
Yeah,
on
it was a
Western
cancer, but he
civilization.
said it
Yeah.
wasn't a religion. Well, I mean, that's enough to really, if I'm Muslim, I mean, if I'm here in the country, I mean, I'm certainly going to
Mm-hmm.
be very upset about that. If I happen to be living
Mm-hmm.
any place and I'm a Muslim or even a non-Muslim, you know, I'm going to find that upsetting.
Well,
So yeah, go on.
Well, the reason why he said that is because for those of us that have really studied this, Islam is more than a religion. It includes a religion, yes, but it's also a theocratic rule set for governing society that goes beyond religious law, and that's called Sharia law. And I'm adamantly opposed to allowing Sharia law in any of its forms in the United States. It's incompatible with the Constitution of the United States. But, there's a reason why folks like me, I'm a Christian, and I push back against folks when I hear things like, well, the U.S. is a Christian nation. Well, yeah, most of our folks have some type of Christian background, and our law is based on Judeo-Christian concepts, but it's also based on natural law, which is a Western concept and everything. But the key to us is it's based on the natural rights given to us by our Creator, by nature, and the right to live, the right to be free, the right to own private property. All of those things are not given by government, but given to us as our right of existence as human beings. And Islam does not do that. And I think what General Flynn was trying to articulate is that Islam is much, much more than a religion. You cannot look at it like a religion like Judaism or Christianity in the same way, because its law applies to non-believers. And that's the key difference. Christian law, or Jewish law doesn't apply to non-believers. And in Islam, Sharia law applies to all non-believers, just like it applies to believers. And it's a form of government. So you have to be able to separate the two. And even folks that are Muslims, many of them can't even separate the two, especially if they're a church, what we would call a church quorum, vanilla Baptist or Catholic or whatever, that may not be studied and deep into doctrine and the Bible and theology. They may not even be aware of that. But if you go to these countries that are ruled by Islamic law, you will see very, very quickly what General Flynn's discussing. And it is a cancer on Western civilization, because they don't believe and will not believe in the same rights and freedoms that we believe that the Creator gave us. It's not compatible. And it's not to be mean to anybody, but we have to face the reality of it. And this political correctness that tries to steer away from facing the reality that Islam, at its foundation, has this challenge, and this problem really exacerbates the challenge for us to keep our citizens safe and our allies safe and ourselves safe.
I mean, I definitely understand that. I'm just saying that there are people who are Muslim who practice Islam, and they very much believe that what they're doing is right, just like you and just like I do in terms of our religion, and to hear somebody say that what they're doing is not a religion. And I understand what you're saying about the interpretation and maybe what he was talking about, but maybe that is what he was saying, but
No, I believe it is what he's saying. It is. I believe it. I believe what he believes. It is not solely a religion. You cannot look at it in the same way that you look at Christianity or Judaism. The nature of Islam is that it drives itself to be the governing influence in the government over a society, and that's its goal. And if we don't acknowledge that, then that's not good for our society, because our society is incompatible with things like Sharia law. And we have to recognize that and take that challenge on without being politically correct about it. You know, there are many Muslims that are American Muslims that fight against Sharia law and are adamantly opposed to that, but their voices are not very well heard sometimes, because like this government currently has reached out to folks that have worked with things like organizations like CARE, which is backed by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a Sharia-based outreach organization that wants to change other societies to a Sharia-based society. And that's not the proper approach for American Muslims to go. The proper approach is to eliminate Sharia law and then move on. And then you know, the Muslim religion would be compatible with the Constitution of the United States.
Okay, we have about a minute or two. Let me quickly do something. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen for a second. Bear with me. I'm going to share my screen, and there you are. You should be looking hopefully at the Twitter page. Do you see the Twitter page?
No, not yet. I still see you.
You still see me. Okay. It has not come up yet then. All right. Okay. Bear with me.
There it is.
There it is. How's that?
I've got a gray, there it is.
Okay. So this was the page as it existed when we first started, and I just happened to see a couple things. Let me just throw real quick. Okay, obviously carrier victory bolsters Trump's economic chops. Electoral college issue. Let me quickly go down. Romney phone. Okay, David Clark, potential Trump pick for Homeland Security. Have you had a chance to meet him?
I have not met Sheriff Clark. I think he's a very capable individual. I have met Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who's another very capable individual, and I understand both of them are being looked at for Homeland Security, and I think either one of them could do a great job.
Okay. Now, here's something that really struck me, and I thought of you. According to news reports, Trump is thinking of making Sarah Palin the head of Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm assuming that you heard about this before.
I just heard about it this morning. That was
okay.
an unexpected, but I think it's a good idea. It's my understanding that when she was approached about it, that Mr. Trump said, we need somebody that can get the media spotlight and keep it focused on all these problems in the VA. And you can say what you want about Governor Palin on policy and those kind of things, but she is good at that. And she's a mother of a veteran and mother-in-law of a Medal of Honor recipient, Dakota Meyer, and I think she would be great in that position. And she has demonstrated a strong skill set for getting organizations and bureaucracies that are not functioning well back to a functioning capacity and not focused on their mission. And I think that she would do very well at that.
Okay. She supported you.
She has supported me in both of my races and has been very loyal, and I support her in this effort too. Matter of fact, you'll see a Facebook post from me go out tonight about this very subject. I'm very excited about it.
Well, I'll send you this clip and you can put it up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Really? Okay, well, listen, I know time is running short. Let me go back out and stop the sharing. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to post this. We will put it up on YouTube. We get a tremendous amount of audience on YouTube. Unbelievable. We will post it and edit it and put it up in different locations. And on Facebook, etc., and on Bayou Buzz. So I really appreciate your taking your time and being with us. I really do. Is there anything that I didn't ask that maybe you might want to say or mention? And if you could hold on, I'm going to turn this thing off. I'm going to send you another link real quick because I want to discuss something with you about this technology after we go off. So if you would.
I've got another session coming up, so I can't get back to you right away when you send me that link, but I will get back to you. I would just say that I appreciate the opportunity to come on, Steve, and that for all of us, there are ways that we can serve. Different folks do things differently. I've served in the military and now look to serve in government. I already serve at the parish executive committee level for the Republican Party here in St. Tammany, and have for 3 years now. So I have won one election with 87% of the vote last March was for that seat. So we just all need to continue to look at each other as Americans and as Louisianans, and that we want to do what's right. And I think if we approach each other from that regard, we can get past some of the partisan differences and find real solutions. And that's what I'm about, is finding solutions to problems. And I think that's what sold Mr. Trump on a lot of folks, is that he believes that finding solutions is the most important thing. And if we can do that, then we'll have an America for our grandchildren that we can be proud of and our founders would be proud of.
Okay. Rob Maness, Colonel Rob Maness, listen, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, get back with me. I'll send, well, when you can, just get back with me. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. And thank your followers and supporters for getting out the word. And I'll get this information to them. I really appreciate it.
Sir.
Take care.
Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye.